First episode did really well. We appreciate all of the support and the feedback. As you all know, I am Octi, and I'm joined by our special guest, Nickinator. If you have any words for the intro that you would like to tell everybody, go right ahead.
Not much, just happy to be back, happy to not get replaced yet, and let's roll.
So we've got a pretty big show planned for today. We're going to go over storylines in the NFL offseason, including franchise tags, possible surprise cuts, and maybe what some teams who are sort of stuck in the middle should do. We're going to talk about the NFL Draft and the NFL Combine starting this week. We're going to give our predictions for the MLB season. We are going to briefly go over some storylines for the second half of the NBA season, and we've got a little surprise at the end, so it should be pretty fun. So we're going to start today off by going over some players who we predict to get franchise tagged. Currently, there have been two players who have gotten the tag so far, being Daron Payne from the Commanders and then Evan Engram earlier this morning with the Jacksonville Jaguars. So other than the obvious one of Lamar Jackson, who we realistically can expect, if he doesn't sign an extension, will at least get tagged, who are some players who could get franchise tagged? And I guess I'll go first. I think the interesting team to watch here could be the Giants. They have two guys who could be possibly franchise tagged with Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley. If I had to guess, I would assume they would prioritize Daniel Jones because he's the quarterback. He wants $45 million a year reportedly, and that's kind of ridiculous. So I can't expect them to want to pay him that type of annual money. So I wouldn't be surprised if he's tagged, but then they'll have to make a decision with Saquon Barkley, because with him being a running back and already being in the league for 5 years, I'm not entirely sure how much you want to pay him, considering he has already shown a lot of wear and tear throughout his career.
Yeah, I wouldn't be shocked if they just let Daniel Jones go and prioritize keeping Saquon, because Saquon has shown that he has the ability to help and produce, and he's not going to be nearly as expensive as $45 million that Daniel Jones wants. And if they can't get Daniel Jones, there's plenty of veteran guys who are on the market who can either keep them at the pace that they're going or simply just go try and get a guy next year, because the draft class next year for QB-wise is a lot better than it is this year. And if the team is playing well, then just go get a veteran and save some money.
So next up, we're going to look at some possible surprise cuts. Every year, there are pretty good players who are generally older and end up getting cut in terms of usually financial reasons, because the team wants to clear up some money. Maybe they're getting a little bit worse. So we'll go over, how about two surprise cuts each? And I'll go first. I think Joe Mixon with the Bengals could be a pretty interesting one. The Bengals would save $8 million if they cut him after June 1st. Joe Mixon, again, good player. He hasn't shown a ton of signs of regression, but he's been a running back in this league for 6 years. And as a running back, that's pretty old. Along with some possible off-field rumors that came up within the last couple of months, maybe the Bengals just don't want to deal with that baggage. And with a great running back class, it wouldn't be a major surprise to see them draft one early and potentially move on from him. The other one we are going to go through is Devin White, and he's probably not going to get cut per se, but he's going to be entering the last year of his deal, the 5th-year option. The Buccaneers would save $11 million if he's traded, and he wasn't all that good this year, but I think Tampa Bay could get some value for him. There's still a lot of upside with him, and he has shown to be a talented player. So if the Bucs do go an all-out rebuild, maybe a guy like Devin White is on his way out.
Yeah, and going alongside with Devin White and probably getting traded rather than cut, a guy like Darren Waller from the Raiders, I would not be shocked if he's out his door, whether that's in a Aaron Rodgers deal or not. They saved like $10 million trading him. He's over 30 at this point. They have plenty of weapons receiver-wise, and it's not that hard to find a tight end that can suffice a team. So to be able to trade Darren Waller to a team like the Packers or even like the Giants or something like that, I would not be surprised by at all. And then probably the biggest name out of any list, Jalen Ramsey could very well be traded within the next few weeks even. And I know you're very excited for that. He's getting a lot of buzz going to the Detroit. And depending on the price, I would not be shocked at all if Detroit makes that move.
I think it would make a lot of sense for the Lions, and I'm crossing my fingers that it actually happens. So now we're going to take a look at some teams who are sort of stuck in the middle. They're not good, but they're not bad, and they don't appear to be contending anytime soon. I think teams who are a little bit older and in sticky financial situations like the Saints, the Titans, the Rams, to a lesser extent Green Bay, I think they should all kind of look to tear it down and start over. I think for those teams who have been contenders over the last 5 years, really, none of them made the playoffs this year, and their championship windows seem to be closing. Obviously, with Green Bay, that's very contingent on what happens with Aaron Rodgers. But with the other three teams, for the Saints, that window looks like it's closed. With the Titans, it seems like they are embracing a full-on rebuild, as they should. And then with the Rams, by cutting Bobby Wagner and by likely trading Jalen Ramsey, I feel like they may be going that route too, although they still have plenty of talented older players on their roster. I think, though, just because you're in the middle doesn't mean you necessarily have to go for an all-out rebuild. I think a team like maybe the Steelers or even New England, I think those teams should continue to try to, maybe stay the course a little bit. I think Pittsburgh has a pretty good core in place on both sides of the ball. New England does as well. I don't know if either of those teams are sold on their quarterbacks yet, but both of them have shown some good potential to be the guy.
Yeah, definitely teams like the Steelers or Patriots do have some pieces in place that they can go and improve upon. New England spent all that money 2 years ago in free agency, and it's mostly helped, but Mac Jones has no one to throw the ball to, so they're definitely going to be looking forward to someone to help him out. Steelers, Matt Canada is an awful offensive coordinator. I don't know why he's still employed at all. But Kenny Pickett showed flashes towards the end of the year, and I wouldn't be shocked if he started next year. Try and produce with that receiving core with Pickens and Johnson. But a team like the Packers, like you said earlier, assuming Rodgers is traded, I would not be shocked if they could make a bit of a run for like a wild card spot in a very weak NFC. Like besides the Eagles, Cowboys, Niners, I'm not super high on any of these teams. And seeing what Jordan Love did against an Eagles defense coming in the third quarter, I think he came in, he was great. And if they can get a good tight end or receiver in that first round to help Jordan Love, I wouldn't be shocked if the Packers could turn that what looks like a limbo situation into something profitable.
Yeah, as much as I hate to say it, I think you're kind of onto something there. I think the Packers could find themselves in a good position if Jordan Love is the guy. Now, unfortunately for them, they've already had him for 3 years, so they're going to have to make an early decision on whether they pay him or not. But if things work out, I think, again, unfortunately, the Packers' future could look better than everyone's projecting it to be now. So let's shift our attention to the NFL draft cycle. Now looking at the NFL draft and the NFL Combine, there are going to be a lot of interesting storylines that really come up over the next few weeks. And we'll be starting with any teams who we could see possibly looking to trade up or down in the draft. And I think in terms of trading up, the obvious answer at the top is going to be the teams who need quarterbacks. I don't think anybody else who doesn't need a quarterback should look to move up because you're going to have to give up a premium haul in order to do so. So I think it'll be interesting to see teams who are in the top 5, maybe like Houston or Indianapolis, trying to move up to that first spot to get their guy. Maybe a team a little bit farther down the board like Carolina. They could be a team who looks to move up. The Jets, although I think they would rather go after a veteran. Washington could be a surprise team as well. And then for teams moving down, a team who I think should look to trade back is Atlanta. I don't know if the Falcons have an obvious pick at 8, and I think the top of the line defensive talent is probably going to be off the board. If they want to draft a quarterback, then go ahead. I could totally see them doing that. But I do think they like Desmond Ridder enough to want to see what he's made of this year. So I think if you can find a team like the Jets or Washington or whomever who might want to move up and get a quarterback, I think pick 8 with the Falcons could be a hot spot to do that.
Yeah, Atlanta could definitely move down here. They have plenty of needs, specifically looking at the O-line and the D-line. But looking a little higher than that, 3 at Arizona, they're probably in line to get one of Jalen Carter or Will Anderson. But the idea of being able to trade down and fill out more holes on that team is too idealing to me. And if a team like maybe even Philly wants to try and go up and get one of those elite edge rushers, or if, say, a QB falls and they want to go get Will Levis or Anthony Richardson, then they're going to look to Arizona trying to hop ahead of Indy to try and get one of those edge rushers. And Arizona has plenty of holes. Hopkins is out the door. Chosen Anderson is probably out the door. So they're going to need holes on receiver, O-line, The entire defense needs fixing. There's a lot that Arizona needs to fix, and I would not be shocked to see them going down, and even their new GM has said that they're looking to trade down.
And then shifting our attention a little bit to the NFL Draft Combine, there are some very interesting storylines at the top of the Combine. Obviously, yesterday we had the Jalen Carter bombshell, and I don't really know what we can expect with that. I guess we're going to have to continue to find out details over the next few days and weeks. But some other possible storylines we could look at. One I'm curious about is if the Anthony Richardson hype train is real, because over the last week or two, it seems like his stock, according to a lot of NFL media people and whatnot, have really gone up. And I think if media people are thinking this about him, teams have to be as well. And there are going to be some teams who really, really like him enough to possibly look to take him as high as in the top 5 of this year's class, because he does have the physical upside to be a star, and that's what teams are looking for. They want to take a big swing on a quarterback. They want to find their Josh Allen, their Justin Herbert, going a little farther back, their Cam Newton, and that's what Anthony Richardson can be. So I'm curious to see if the stock with him stays the same or if it continues to rise. I'm curious to see how he interviews, and ultimately, by the end of the week, if we have a more consensus agreement on at least where we think he's going to end up in terms of his draft range.
Yeah, I'm also really interested to see how Anthony Richardson performs, and just more so even interviews, just to see how he can poise himself as a future quarterback. He's going to need to land in the right situation. I'm not sure what situation that would be, but if it ends up being like a Seattle or Detroit somehow, then that's probably the best case scenario. But probably my favorite going into it is what running backs are going to be able to show that they can perform besides B.J. Robinson, and maybe even close the gap, specifically looking at a guy like Jahmyr Gibbs. You talked about it in our duo mock draft that Jahmyr Gibbs could possibly be a first rounder, but probably not because of running backs going the first round. You don't want to do that. But I think if Jahmyr Gibbs or even a guy like Zach Charbonnet, if they can perform really well at that combine, they could close that gap, and we can see Gibbs go in the first round, Charbonnet go in the early second round, and plenty of other guys shoot up the draft board, and that might cause Bijan to fall. That could cause a whole lot of dominoes.
Yeah, it'll certainly be interesting to see how the running back board plays out, and I think it's going to be largely dependent on how high Bijan ends up going. I think most years he would probably be projected a little bit earlier, but because this is such a deep class at the position, he might end up going later because teams are going to recognize we can get a guy like Jahmyr Gibbs or Zach Charbonnet in the second round. Maybe we can even look later, someone like Keandre Miller from TCU, Tyjae Spears, from Tulane. And, of course, my guy, who I'm pleased to mention, Sean Tucker out of Syracuse. So I think the running back class this year is as good as it's been in a while. And this could be another scenario like 2017 where we have just a ton of legitimately good starting running backs going across the board, not just early, but even late as well. So I think, as we kind of talked about earlier with some of the surprise cuts with Joe Mixon, for example, maybe Alvin Kamara as well, possibly, I think we're going to see a lot of possibly surprising teams who you wouldn't expect to look for a running back. Pick one, because there's so many good ones and guys who I think can really change the dynamics of some of these offenses. So we'll now be shifting our attention to the MLB season. It is going to be starting in around a month or so, and we've already got spring training kicking off. In the previous episode of the show, we talked about some of the big-time rule changes, and now we're sort of going to go through our MLB predictions for this upcoming season, and we're going to start with some of the biggest free agents who are on new teams and how we think they're going to do. So who are some free agents who you may think are going to make a bigger impact than people expect right off the bat?
Yeah, I'm a little biased, of course, but Trey Turner, I think, is going to be exceptional in sliding into the Phillies. Making him that leadoff guy instead of Kyle Schwarber is going to not only help the entire team, but also Kyle Schwarber is going to have probably even a better season than last year because, of course, you get a lot of home runs, but when you're the leadoff guy, you get a lot of leadoff home runs. You're not going to get as many RBIs, not going to get as many runs. But I think having him slide in that 2-hole right behind Trey Turner, Turner's on base, Kyle Schwarber goes yard, that's 2 runs instead of 1. It's a net positive. But one team, along with their free agents, that I really like, and you'll see a little head go ahead, The Chicago Cubs, and specifically Dansby Swanson and Cody Bellinger. I do not know what it is, but I have this gut feeling that Chicago Cubs are bringing in a fantastic core. I think they're going to be able to help Bellinger not become the MVP he was, but become a lot better than he has been the past 2-3 years. And Dansby Swanson has his best year of his career last year. He's going to have a lot more time to shine. And they have a great core around those two guys in the outfield, like Suzuki, the second baseman, I can't remember his name, who was from the White Sox, and that Craig Kimbrell, I can't remember his name. But they have a great core on that offense. The pitching is looking better and better each day. And there's something about that Cubs offense with Swanson and Bellinger that I just love going forward.
I think the most interesting one for me right off the bat is going to be Xander Bogaerts with the Padres. Not necessarily like an under-the-radar signing, but the Padres have only missed a few pieces to try to get over the hump. But I think adding a true veteran like Xander Bogaerts who can help facilitate the culture there, continue to get the young guys to grow on and off the field. And, of course, they're also going to bring back Fernando Tatis Jr. from his injury and suspension pretty early into the season. So I think if all goes well, I know the Padres have been close, but it's been kind of obvious that they are still a piece or two away. I think Xander Bogaerts and Tatis being back could be the missing pieces for San Diego to ultimately get them over the hump. So now we are going to go through our predictions, and we're going to go through each division, starting with the American League East, which should be one of the best divisions in the league. I think other than probably Boston, you can make a case for anybody there making the playoffs. I have a hard time picking against the Yankees to win the division. However, I think the Blue Jays and the Rays in particular could certainly look to make a run, and maybe if all the young talent develops in Baltimore, the Orioles could do something interesting as well. But until proven otherwise, I feel like the Yankees are going into it the team to beat, but I could see this division going in a number of different ways.
Yeah, I'm pretty much agreeing exactly with how you said it. The Yankees are definitely the team to beat. They improved in the pitching category. Offensive-wise, they're going to still be carried by Aaron Judge, but they do still have a good core around him. And if they can perform at least like they did in the first half of the year, then they'll be flying into winning the division. The Blue Jays, I do like. I think they've gotten better than last year, but it is going to take a lot to get over the hump with the Yankees. And then the Rays, they've been having this philosophy the past 5-10 years, and I just don't think it's going to be enough with how good of a division they're in. And Red Sox, they're not going to do much. Their pitching's atrocious. Their offense is Rafael Devers, and that's it. And then the Orioles really overperformed last year. I don't think they have the core to get over the hump in what might be the best division in baseball. And they're going to have to overperform even more, and with pretty much the exact same roster they had last year.
Let's move over to the AL Central now, which probably is going to be one of the lesser divisions in the league. Last year, the Cleveland Guardians surprised us by winning the division. I think going into the season, they are the healthy favorite to win it again. And at this point, I do have a hard time picking against Cleveland, and I hate to be chalky, but I do think the Guardians on paper are the best team in that division. They've done an incredible job of developing their pitchers, so they should be one of the best pitching teams in the American League. I think the AL Central could be better than people think because I think there are some young teams who could improve. I think the Kansas City Royals could outperform expectations. They've got a fun young core. They could be a team who surprises people and maybe wins 80 games. And then I think the Minnesota Twins are going to be a lot better than they were last year as well. They brought back Carlos Correa. They also have a pretty solid team, and they've been a consistent playoff team or playoff caliber team over the last 5 or so years. So I wouldn't be surprised to see them have a better season than expected. And even the White Sox, they have plenty of high-end talent as well. So I think really anybody, except for Detroit, unfortunately, could give Cleveland a little bit of a scare in that division, but I do find it hard to pick against the Guardians.
Yeah, I think right now it's definitely the Guardians division to lose. And the AL Central past about 5 years, it's always who wins the division and who loses in the divisional to what mostly is the Yankees or Astros. I think the Guardians could make a bit more of a run than they did last year. I think they've improved. They've shown that they can perform in the playoffs, taking the Yankees to 5. I don't think the Tigers or Royals are going to do much. The Royals, like you said, could do a bit better than last year, but as a playoff team, I don't think they're ready at all yet. The White Sox have that young core that they still have plenty of outfield Luis Robert. Andrew Vaughn's performing a lot better, but I don't think they're ready just yet. They're the epitome of mid as they are. And then the Twins, I do agree with you. They've gotten a lot better. I think right now I have them barely getting into the playoffs at the 7th seed. But I think overall it's going to be hard to beat the Guardians. They're just perfect all around. They're great.
And then moving to the American League West, this division is a little bit more cut and dry than the other ones. You had the Astros, who are really good. I find it very unlikely that a team other than the Astros wins this division. You got the Mariners, who made the playoffs last year for the first time in over 20 years. They've got a young, fun team, and presumably you'd think they should be able to get better. The Texas Rangers could be interesting. They've added some high-end talent in free agency over the last few years with Seager, Semien, and, of course, Jacob deGrom this year, if he stays healthy, which with him, you never know. And obviously the Angels have the two best players in baseball with Trout and Ohtani, and they have some decent pieces on their roster, but they're the Angels, and they can't just not shoot themselves in the foot. And then Oakland stinks. We don't need to talk about Oakland. So I have a hard time thinking somebody other than the Astros wins that division, but it will be interesting to see if Seattle or one of the other teams can contend for a wild card spot again.
Yeah, once again, I'm pretty much just on your side with this. Astros should be the clear favorite to win. I wouldn't be too shocked if the Mariners get closer than they were last year. I think the Astros slightly digressed from last year, but I think they're still the clear favorite, probably the World Series favorite right now. But the Mariners did get a lot better. They got Teoscar Hernandez, Colton Wong. The pitching looks really good going into the future. But I do think the Astros are going to clear away, try to win the division. The Rangers, I don't think they're ready just yet. The pitching is really just Jacob deGrom, and that's about it. And that's if he's healthy. The hitting, it's gotten better, but Marcus Semien was not himself last year. I don't know if he'll get back to himself like he was this year. And then the Angels, they're two players and then not too much else. And I don't think they're going to be able to do much. And Shohei is going to be a Dodger, and we're all going to cry.
So with that, we've now gone through the American League, and we can now make our predictions for the 3 division winners and the 3 wild card teams. So for the divisions, I've got the Yankees, the Guardians, and the Astros. Pretty simple. As for the wild card spots, I hate to be chalky and kind of go with what we saw last year, but I think the Blue Jays are back. I think the Rays are back. And we'll go a little bit bold with our last spot and give it to Minnesota.
Yeah, I'm more or less the same, but I think right now I'm going to go Yankees, Astros, Guardians, and then as the wild cards, I'm going to put the Mariners in there. I'm going to keep them in. Put the Blue Jays in. I'm going to keep the Rays out and put Minnesota in as well.
All right, let's move over to the National League now, and we'll start with the NL East, which on paper should be a very good division. You have the Braves, who are a legit contender. You have the Mets, who are a legit contender, and you have the Phillies, who are a legit contender. I don't think Miami or Washington is going to make a ton of noise. I think the Marlins are a little better than people realize, but even so, I don't think they're going to win much more than 75 games. So I think it really comes down to those 3 teams at the top. Last year, throughout the regular season, we had the big race with the Braves and Mets, and I think with the moves that the Phillies made this offseason, along with their momentum of making it to the World Series, there's no reason to think that they can't be in the hunt for the division the entire year as well. So I really could see it going any which way with those 3 teams at the top. Yeah,
both the AL and the NL pretty much have more of a 3-way race for that division, and I think this division will be a lot more closer than the American League one. The Braves, they're always going to be good. The Mets, they're spending every money they can. And the Phillies are riding high from that World Series. And I can realistically see either one of those 3 teams winning the division. And I wouldn't be shocked if it was any of them. The Marlins, I do really like, and I think they're going to outperform a lot of people's expectations. But I just don't think that offense is ready yet. They always put money in drafting into the pitching. But that offense just isn't there yet, and I don't think it's ready just yet, like a certain other team we'll talk about later. And the Nationals are just trying to tank.
So that brings us to the NL Central, which on paper is not very good, but I think this division is actually kind of interesting. You have the Cardinals at the top, who won the division last year. The Cardinals are always, pretty good. The Brewers are interesting. They've been steady over the last few seasons, but it seems like they're kind of going downhill. And then as you kind of talked about earlier, I think the Chicago Cubs also could be a surprise team with all the moves they've made within the offseason. They've really improved the lineup. So I think the Cubs absolutely could be a sleeper team, and then you have the Reds and the Pirates down below in the basement. So I think the Cardinals, for good reason, are the favorite here, and the Cardinals deserve the benefit of the doubt because, again, they're always good. But I wouldn't be surprised if Milwaukee or Chicago gives them a run for their money this year.
Yeah, I definitely think it is St. Louis's division to lose. I wouldn't be too shocked if they don't perform as well, if all their older players digress a little bit, especially with the new pitch clock rules. But I'm more so worried about Chicago than I am Milwaukee. I'm very anti-Milwaukee. I think their offense is putrid even. And when you got your Cy Young winner, Corbin Burns, talking trash about the entire team pretty much, and maybe even wanting out, I would not be shocked if they start selling some pieces, getting rid of some players, and start joining the Reds and the Pirates.
And that'll wrap us up with the NL West. And similar to the Central, you have the Dodgers, who are always good. They've won this division for at least 10 years in a row. The Dodgers are not as good on paper as they've been in a while, though. They lost a lot of talent, and they didn't really replace that high-end talent with more high-end guys. Now, in the long term, the Dodgers are going to be fine. They have plenty of money. Their farm system is really good. But for this year, could we see the Dodgers take a step back? And I think the San Diego Padres, as I alluded to earlier, have the missing pieces to be really good. I don't think the other three teams stand much of a chance. The Rockies are the Rockies, and then the Diamondbacks and the Giants are just pretty much below average. So I think it's going to be a two-horse race, and I think, unlike the last few seasons, we could have a new team at the top of the West.
Yeah, like pretty much exactly how you said it. It's going to be a two-team race. I'm really high on the Diamondbacks for one, but I don't think they're ready quite just yet. They're pretty much the new Orioles to me, but I think they're better than the Orioles were last year. But the Rockies aren't doing anything. Giants are the epitome of mid. It's just like the White Sox. And then, but with the Dodgers, I do think they're going to continue to be the Dodgers and just continue to do what they've been, and that's dominating. They are going to have a few players step up, like Miguel Rojas, and I can't even think of who else. Maybe even Mookie Betts play second. Because Gavin Luck's tearing his ACL. He's gone for the year. They lost Trey Turner and didn't replace anyone at shortstop, shockingly. So they're going to have a hole at shortstop, and that might have to cause a domino effect of some players switching positions, like Mookie playing second, and we'll have to see how they play that.
So now that we've gone through all of the divisions, we can share our predictions for the National League. For the divisions, I think I'm going to go with Atlanta once again, the Cardinals winning the Central, and then I think the Padres are going to end up winning the West. I think this is their year to finally overtake the Dodgers. I still think the Dodgers are going to, at least at the bare minimum, get a wild card spot, and then for the other two, it's a little bit harder. I think the Cubs and the Brewers could overtake the Phillies and the Mets. And although I think the Phillies are good enough to win a World Series, I also think there's a chance that their playoff run could be a little bit fluky. And although they got a lot better in the offseason, maybe they don't live up to expectations. So I'm going to go a little bit bold and say the Mets get one wild card spot and the Cubs get the other.
See, I'm kind of in the same boat as you, but I kept the Phillies in, took someone else out. I got the Braves winning, got the Cardinals winning. I'm going to keep the Dodgers winning. I don't want to ever doubt the Dodgers until I see it happen. But I am positive the Padres will at least get in as a wild card bid. I'm going to put the Phillies in. That was my other wild card spot because I'm wholly biased. And also because Bryce Harper's coming back at the end of the year, and we'll finish on a hot streak and we'll be good. And then I'm going to put I do want to put the Cubs in as that last seed. I really like them going forward, and there's just something about this Mets team that I just don't like going into this year, and we'll see if I'm right or wrong.
So now that we've gone through the teams who we think are going to make the playoffs, let's talk about who we think is going to win the World Series. And for me, I have, although they got a little bit worse, I can't see anybody other than the Astros making out of the American League. And then with the NL, I'm going to continue to ride the Padres train. I don't know why. I just have a good feeling about them. And let's ride with San Diego. I'm going to pick the Padres to beat the Astros in 6 games. I think this is their year.
Yeah, I'm definitely not as high on the Padres as you are, but I will stick with the Astros. I don't. It's going to be hard to see anyone else get out of it. The Yankees are they're the son of the Astros at this point. The Astros own them, but I can't see anyone else getting past them. Maybe the Guardians, they get hot, but I just don't see it right now. And then out of the NL, it's a little bit harder, but I'm gonna go with the Braves. I don't think Philly's gonna be able to get out of it just yet, but I think the Braves have probably the best all-around roster in baseball right now, along with the Astros. And I'm gonna stick with the Astros, we'll get 7 games. I think getting a rematch of 2021, and we'll see how that goes.
All right, now let's go through our award picks before we shift over to the NBA. And we'll start with the MVP in the American League. I'm going to pick Shohei Ohtani to win it. I think he's the best player in baseball. I think he personally should have won it last year. I know a lot of people disagree, but I will die on that hill. And then in the National League, again, sticking with the Padres, Manny Machado's been my guy for a while. I think he's going to have a monster year after signing his big contract extension. So I'm going to go with Shohei and Manny Machado.
Yeah, I'm going to stick with you and go with Shohei. It took me a little bit, but I started the junior training. Shohei should have won it last year. I do like having dark horses, and I think right now my dark horse for AL is going to be Jose Ramirez. I think if the Guardians can get a bit hot towards the playoffs and even the end of the year, I would not be shocked if Jose Ramirez goes off just like in the Guardian series. And then in the NL, I'm going to go a little bold here. I'm going to go with Mookie Betts. I think the Dodgers are going to be really good as always, and I think Mookie is going to have to step up, probably play second a bit more and play a few more games here and there, and they're going to stay past the Padres, keep trucking, keep going, and I think Mookie's going to carry them to as far as they can go. And the dark horse, it's a bit hard to find a dark horse in the NL, but I'm just going to go with Matt Olson because the Braves are very good and Matt Olson is very good.
Yeah, before we go over to Cy Young, I'll try to think of some dark horses as well. I think it'll be interesting to see if some of these super young guys who have looked good can take that next step up in the American League. Julio Rodriguez and Wander Franco both come to mind. So I wouldn't be surprised to see either player take that big leap. Julio Rodriguez has already proven himself as an all-star caliber player, and I wouldn't be surprised if Wander Franco does the same this year as long as he can stay healthy. And then in the National League, I agree, it is a little bit harder to find a good one, but I think I'm going to go with Trey Turner with the Phillies. I know I didn't pick the Phillies to make the playoffs, but I think if the Phillies do end up being good this year, it would be because Trey Turner is the engine of that team, hitting for average, stealing bases, playing pretty good defense, and hitting for power as well. He's not necessarily a dark horse in terms of talent. I think we can all agree he's a top 10 to 15 player in baseball, or at least probably in that range, maybe a little bit lower. But I'm going to pick him as my dark horse. As for the Cy Youngs in the American League, I think this is Alek Manoah's year. He's been really good for a while. I think he's going to take another step up this year and prove to be the best pitcher in the AL. And then in the NL, last year I predicted Sandy Alcantara to win it, and I nailed it. And I've been a big Sandy guy for a while. I think I'm going to stay on the Sandy train again this year and pick him. So no super dark horse pick from me, unlike last year, but I'm going to ride with Manoah and Sandy Alcantara.
Yeah, Cy Young, I think, might be even harder to pick than an MVP. I'm going a little bold in the AL, and I'm going to go Shohei Ohtani. I think he has excelled at pitching. I think he was second or third for Cy Young this past year, or at least he should have been. And he was excellent. If it wasn't for Verlander, I would have picked him for first. And I think if he can continue doing that, he could become, I assume, the first player to win MVP and Cy Young in a single year. And my dark horse is Minnesota's Joe Ryan. I think they got him in a Baltimore trade about 2 years ago, and he's been excellent. And I think if they're able to get into the playoffs, it's going to be because Joe Ryan has stepped up and become that ace for the future. And then in the NL, a little biased here, but I do think Aaron Nola has been able to step up and become in the 2019 form, and is probably better than Zach Wheeler is right now. And I would not be shocked if Aaron Nola is going to be able to step up, help the Phillies with that in the offense. If their offense is struggling, I'm not going to be surprised if Aaron Nola can keep them in that game. And my dark horse, going back to the Diamondbacks, Zach Gallen. He was excellent last year. I think he was top 10 in Cy Young, maybe even top 5. And like you said, Sandy is really good. But I think Zach Gallen and Aaron Nola are going to give him room for his money.
As for dark horses for me in the American League, I'll just say anybody on the Astros because Houston knows how to develop pitching. Justin Verlander, he's out the door. So they've got some good young guys behind him. Framber Valdez was a legitimate all-star last year. Christian Javier showed a lot of improvement. He signed an extension. So I really wouldn't be surprised to see either of those guys take the next step and be a Cy Young caliber pitcher. I think Cleveland's another team to watch. Those guys also know how to develop pitchers. Could Shane Bieber continue his ace performance for another season? Maybe a young guy like Tristan McKenzie takes another step forward and wins it. And then in the National League, I think it's a little bit harder to find good ones. Zach Gallen, I think, is a really good choice. He's been very underrated for a number of seasons. Maybe a young guy on the Dodgers steps up. Maybe we see like a Dustin May big season. I don't know about Cy Young, but maybe he takes a leap. Maybe somebody young within the Cardinals organization. Those guys know how to develop pitchers as well. So that's going to be interesting to see who can be the American League and National League Cy Youngs. Let's go to the Rookie of the Years now. This is always a fun one. So I think it's very easy to go with some of the top prospects because those are just the obvious talents. And although it would be kind of fun to see somebody who flies under the radar and wins the award, I think there are too many really good prospects to expect it to be somebody else. So in the American League, I think it's going to be Gunnar Henderson with the Baltimore Orioles. He has been rising up the farm system for multiple years now. He's been rising up prospect rankings, and depending where you look, he might be number 1 overall. He's probably going to start the season in the big leagues after playing a little bit there last year. And then in the National League, again, I hate to be chalky, but I think Corbin Carroll with the Diamondbacks is really, really good. The guy is a blazer. He can run faster than just about anybody, and I think his bat is really going to improve as well. He also played a little bit last year in the big leagues. So, again, I hate to be chalky, but I think those two guys are really, really good.
Yeah, I almost picked Gunnar Henderson to win AL Rookie of the Year. I have seen him play in person, and he is very good. But I went a little different route, and I decided to go with Josh Jung, the Rangers third baseman. I don't know if he's going to play in the MLB right away, but he's an older prospect. He's 25. If he does get into the major leagues sooner rather than later, I wouldn't be shocked if he can help out that hitting core. And if they do make the playoffs, it's going to be because a guy like Josh Jung has stepped up to help carry that offense. And I didn't really know where to go for a dark horse, so I was playing Tristan Cassis, the first baseman, I believe, from the Red Sox. I figured give the Red Sox something to cheer about. And then at the NL, I went chalky with you. I went Corbin Carroll. I think the Diamondbacks will be way better than they were last year. And Corbin Carroll is an excellent drive for that, not just the outfield, just that offense in general. And then going biased, Andrew Painter, a amazing pitching prospect for the Phillies. And he might be probably that 4th or 5th starter for us this year. And he's looked amazing in spring training already. I'm not going to be shocked if the, I believe, 19-year-old ends up being in the rotation and performs excellently.
Let's now take a look at the second half of the NBA season, really the last, quarter of the season. There's only, 20 games left for every team. So we'll start with Russell Westbrook with the Clippers. Things didn't really work out with the Lakers. He was bought out after being traded to Utah and now finds himself with the Clippers. And I personally think we could see a Russell Westbrook career, I don't want to say renaissance, but I think things are going to go better with the Clippers. I think he's a little bit under less of a microscope. I know he's still playing in LA, but everything the Lakers do is under a microscope for everybody to see. And I just think Russ is going to play a little bit better. I feel like he's under a little bit less pressure now, and I'm not going to say that he's going to become some all-star or some really good player, but I just have a feeling that things are going to work out with the Clippers, and I would love to see them make a run. I've been a big Paul George guy for a while, so anything that pushes the Paul George agenda is good with me.
Yeah, I do agree with you. I think Russ is going to perform a bit better than he was with the Lakers so far. I think they can pretty much take what the Lakers were doing with pretty much the second half of the first half of the year with how the Lakers were treating Russ and pretty much just copy and paste that to what they got with them. I do think Russ is going to be able to help elevate what Kawhi and PG are going to be able to do. And right now they're the 6th seed, but it's a tight race between a lot of different teams, the Warriors, Mavs, Timberwolves. And I think they can, if Russ can perform a bit better, then I think they could probably get into one of those playoff spots.
The tank for Victor Wembanyama is on. He is the golden boy, arguably the best prospect we've seen in the NBA since LeBron James, and there are a lot of teams towards the bottom of the league who are probably not necessarily going to try to lose games, but they're not going to put their best foot forward to win games. And as a fan of a team who is in the bottom of the league, I told myself at the beginning of the year that we're probably not going to get Victor, because even the worst teams only have a 15% chance for the number 1 pick. So, as a Pistons fan, I'm already prepared for us to not land Victor and fall to the 4, 5, 6 range in the draft. And it is a really good draft class outside of the top 2 with Victor and Scoot Henderson, who is also a legit number 1 prospect most years. So biasly, in terms of a good fit for Victor, I would obviously like to see Detroit. I think the Pistons have a better young core than a lot of the teams in the bottom. Certainly better than a team like Charlotte. Yeah, they have LaMelo Ball, but they have no culture, and they don't have a lot else. The Rockets have talent, but again, they have no culture whatsoever. And then the Spurs just lack high-end young talent. But I think because of that, the Spurs would honestly be a really good fit as well. They have a lot of very solid young players. They're rookies this year, Jeremy Sohan and Malachi Branham. They've really started to play well. Devin Vassell, Keldon Johnson, those guys are good players. So I think you've got a good group of guys already, but you lack that high-end talent. And I think a guy like Victor would be a lot of fun in San Antonio with Greg Popovich, who knows a thing or two about developing international talents. So for whatever reason, I just have a weird feeling that Victor's going to end up with the Spurs. And I think for him, that would be an ideal landing spot.
Yeah, I was waiting for you to finish. I really wanted to talk about the Spurs. I don't know what it is. I don't know a lot about basketball, but I do kind of get flashbacks to Tim Duncan, just flip the offense and the defense almost. But I do think Victor playing with Popovich, playing in that San Antonio environment, because out of those bottom 4 teams, they definitely have the most culture there with the Spurs. I think like San Antonio, Victor would be an excellent fit there. But if you want to look at like future success, I do think a team like the Hornets could be really good with Victor, at least pairing LaMelo's passing with just Victor's pure skill will be excellent. And then the Rockets, it'd be kind of funny to just see a bunch of babies just running around the court. But I do think the Pistons, if they could add a big guy like Victor, pair him with Cade, pair him with Ivy, I think that could be a really good thing for the future. But Detroit teams don't get a lot of fun things, so probably not, but we'll see.
Yeah, we're not used to fun. I've already talked myself out of it. So before we wrap up, we're going to do something fun like we did during the last episode. So we're going to wrap things up here with a little game. We're going to try to predict the next 5 Super Bowl champions and the next 5 NBA champions. And obviously there's a lot of projecting here. We'll start with the Super Bowl, and we'll start with this upcoming season. Obviously, we have to see the offseason go through, so this isn't like an official prediction. But I think Buffalo is going to start to have a lot of sense of urgency, even though they do have a number of free agents, and on paper might get worse. But I kind of have a gut feeling that Josh Allen takes the next step. He's hearing the critics. Everyone thinks he's not a winner. And I don't know. I know this year was supposed to be the Bills' year, and obviously it ended up not being the case. But for now, I'll start with the Bills as my Super Bowl champion next year.
Yeah, I had the Bills going this year, and based on how they did and how they look in the offseason, I don't know if I'm ready to pick them just yet. I'm going to just be biased and just go with the Eagles. I know they have a good bit of free agents, but Howie Roseman is a wizard when it comes to being a general manager. And if Jalen Hurts takes even just a slight step up, then I wouldn't be shocked if we just make it back and just finally pull it off.
For the 2025 Super Bowl, I'm going to go with Kansas City. Mahomes gets ring number 3. I have a feeling he's going to have a lot more championships than the 2 he currently has, so I think he's going to take his 3rd one for Super Bowl 59. Is that the number it would be, I think?
I think so, yeah. But for Super Bowl 59, we'll call it, I'm going to go with the San Fran 49ers with Trey Lance as their QB. I think they're going to be much more looking forward to what Trey Lance can do with a healthy year. Purdy's not going to be available at the start of the year. And I think keeping Trey Lance, building that offense around him, and keeping that defensive core around, Kyle Shanahan can make any QB do anything he wants. And if they can keep that Debo, CMC, Kittle, Ayuk train going, then I wouldn't be shocked if Trey Lance could excel them even more and take them to a Super Bowl.
My next pick for Super Bowl 60 is ironically the 49ers. I've been on the Trey Lance train, not necessarily that I was obsessed with him coming out of school, but a lot of people have believed that they should build around Brock Purdy, and I think that's crazy. The Niners invested 3 first-round picks into Trey Lance, whereas they invested a 7th-rounder into Brock Purdy, and while he was good, Trey Lance is their guy. And that's not to say that Trey Lance is going to be good per se, but I personally believe he will end up good. I think he's in a perfect situation to succeed. I believe he would still technically be on his rookie deal. He'd be on the 5th-year option for this season, I would believe. And most of the Niners' talent is young enough to where I think they'll still say good. So I'm going to pick the Niners to win Super Bowl 60.
I'm pretty much going to flip it around right there for you. I'm going to pick the Chiefs for Super Bowl 60. I think it's going to take a little bit for Mahomes to do his magic. I think they're going to have to do a little bit of rebuilding with that, specifically the weapons that Mahomes has, besides Kelsey, of course. But I do think Mahomes will get at least one more ring within the next few years, and I wouldn't be shocked if it's even this upcoming year.
For Super Bowl 61, there were a few teams I wanted to decide between, but I think I'm going to go a little bit bold here and say the Miami Dolphins, but without Tua. I'm not saying Tua can't eventually become a Super Bowl caliber quarterback, but I wouldn't be surprised if things don't work out to where Miami wants to eventually add a veteran. I don't know who would be available who's legitimately good within the next couple of years, but I have to assume someone will. And I think the Dolphins have enough young, talented players to be good. This also is contingent on Mike McDaniel taking a step up. But I kind of wanted to get bold here and get fun, and I'm going to pick the Dolphins.
I do want to get a little bolder when it comes to even further into the future. This one's a little less bold than the Dolphins without Tua, but I am just going to go with the Jacksonville Jaguars. Doug Peterson is already a Super Bowl winning head coach. We've seen what he can do with a roster that, like this, going 9-8, making the playoffs. But I think even later down in the future, Trevor Lawrence is probably going to be a top 5 QB at that point. They're going to have a way better defense, way better offense, and I think at some point they're going to finally make it out of the AFC and they're going to do some damage.
And then for the last Super Bowl, we'll go through Super Bowl 62. I'm going to have some fun here, and I'm going to pick the Lions with Anthony Richardson at quarterback. Is this scenario all going to happen? Probably not, but I can dream.
Yeah, I almost went with the Lions, but I went elsewhere in the NFC North. I went the Green Bay Packers with Jordan Love at QB. I really like Jordan Love. Oddly enough, I don't know what it is. Just from what I saw in that Eagles game, I think he could be really good. And if they keep that O-line going strong, they get him some weapons. Matt LaFleur is a really good coach. And that defense, it's young, but it's really good. I really like that defense going forward. And if Jordan Love can show what he can do, I would not be shocked if the Packers beat all the narratives and make it out of the NFC Championship.
So let's shift our attention now to the next 5 NBA champions, and we'll start with this current season. I'm going to pick the Boston Celtics. I think Jason Tatum is good enough to elevate a team to the championship. They made the finals last year. I think they're even better this year. So I'm going to ride with the Celtics to win the 2023 NBA championship.
Yeah, I was definitely thinking Celtics, but just to be different, I'm just going to rock with the Bucks. I think it probably will end up just being whoever makes it out of the Eastern Conference, but probably between Milwaukee and Boston. But Giannis is the best player in the NBA. He is exceptional, and I'm just going to ride Giannis all the way.
So that'll bring us to 2024, and I think for the most part there aren't many super big name players who are going to be on the move within the next year. That could certainly change, but I think I'm going to go with the Denver Nuggets. I've been a Nikola Jokic guy for a while. I think he is deserving of the last 2 MVPs, and I think he's deserving of this one as well. The Nuggets are probably going to have to add another piece or two for this to really happen, but I think they will. I think they realize that they have a franchise-altering player with the Joker, and I think he's going to win one in 2024.
I'm going to go a little different. I'm going to rock with the Grizzlies. I think they're going to find someone to pair with Ja and not only excel whoever they end up getting, but also just excel Ja to be even better than he is right now. And the Western Conference, I feel, there's a lot of teams that aren't there with the Grizzlies. It's kind of weird. The Suns got KD, Mavs got Luka, but I think the Grizzlies are just a lot more well-rounded. And if like the Nuggets can't get anybody else to pair with them, the Suns and the Mavs experiment doesn't work, or if Kyrie leaves, then the Grizzlies might be the favorite to get out of the West next year.
That'll bring us to the 2025 NBA Finals. And I think I'm going to have the Boston Celtics win another one. We've seen a lot of teams kind of become dynasties over the last 20 years in the sense that we've had a lot of multi-time champions. And I don't see any reason for this Boston core to split up anytime soon. I think these guys are going to continue to get better and better. The Celtics are a winning organization. They know how to accumulate high-end talent. So I think Jason Tatum gets ring number 2 and wins the Celtics a chip in 2025.
I'm going to go ahead, another Eastern Conference, even rival of the Celtics, the Cleveland Cavaliers. I think they have a great core in place, probably the best team they've had since LeBron. And I would not be shocked if they can add just one piece or two, maybe, that they can excel past the Bucks and the Celtics and finally break out of the post-LeBron era and finally get back into the finals.
For 2026, I'm going to go with a team who is not currently a contender, but has all the pieces to do so in the future. I'm going to pick the Oklahoma City Thunder. This is probably contingent on them either drafting a superstar within the next couple of years or trading for one. I think Luka Doncic getting traded within the next 3 years is a little bit more realistic than people think. Things haven't really worked out with Kyrie so far, although it's a very small sample size. I don't want to overreact. But if things don't end up working with Kyrie, and based on Kyrie's recent track record, I wouldn't be surprised if it doesn't work out. Maybe Luka asks for a trade, and who has more assets to give than the Oklahoma City Thunder? So we'll get creative here and say Luka Doncic gets traded to the Thunder, joining Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and all the young guys who they are going to add and continue to develop, and they'll win the finals in 2026.
Yeah, I wanted to go with another not as contending team, but I went a little different route with the Toronto Raptors. I wanted to try and find a team that could realistically get a guy like Bronny James and get LeBron on their team. And if you compare LeBron James, even if he's like ancient at that point, he's still going to end up being good. I think we all know that at this point. But if Bronny James ends up being at least somewhat good, then I like the Raptors core right now. I like what they're doing. And if you pair a guy like LeBron James and then you have Bronny on his side, I think they could do something a little crazy and they can make a goddamn run.
And then for 2027, I'm going to pick the San Antonio Spurs with Victor Wembanyama as their franchise player. And Wembanyama will only be 23 years old at this point, so maybe it's a little bit unreasonable to think a 23-year-old number one option in his 4th season, still on a rookie contract, can win a championship. But with Vic being on his rookie deal still, the Spurs are going to continue to have flexibility to add talent. And if stars see how good Victor ends up being, maybe they're going to want to join forces with him. So going back to the Luka thing, if Greg Popovich is still there, which he's going to be like old, so I'm not convinced that Popovich is going to be there in 5 years. But maybe Luka, maybe we see a different star. Maybe a guy like Joel Embiid or Nikola Jokic says, hey, I'm not going to win here. I want out. Could be somebody else. Could be a surprise player, which, as we've seen in the NBA, is very possible. So I'm going to say the Spurs, led by Victor Wembanyama, win the 2027 NBA championship.
I'm going to go a bit of a different route. I did really think about the Spurs with Victor, but I want to go with the Sacramento Kings. I really like the core they have in place now, and I think within the next 5 years, they're going to be able to trade for a star to pair with guys like De'Aaron Fox. It could be Ja, it could be Jokic, it could be Giannis if he ends up leaving. No one knows. But I think the Kings, if they can get a superstar in Sacramento, and they're already the 3 seed in the Western Conference now, outperforming guys like the Suns, Warriors, Clippers, all that, getting that superstar with that amazing core that they have now, they could really do some damage going into the future.
All right, interesting stuff. So there you go, everybody. That'll wrap up the second episode of the show. This was certainly a fun one here to go through. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode as well, and we're going to continue to have fun ideas for little segments towards the end, along with interesting storylines over the next few weeks and months as we continue with the NFL offseason, as we get closer to the MLB season, and even March Madness starting up in a couple of weeks as well. So if you have any final words for viewers, you can share them here.
Not much to say. Just really happy to be on the podcast. Subscribe, everybody, and go Birds.
There you go. So make sure to like and subscribe to the channel if you are new, and that'll wrap it up. Peace out.